PettyRevenge. The first story is by Foxbat, titled Shitty Parking Blocking My Path? I'll Show You Shitty. I live on a really narrow street with parking allowed on one side. The only way I can get out of the front is using a gap in the hedge where the path is, and that hedge is right up to the street. No sidewalk or even manageable gap. If you park blocking the path, I have to either try squeezing beside the car or have to go through the garage, round the front, and up the driveway. Well, it's pretty obvious that some neighbors aren't considerable about not parking there. I already asked them if they could park maybe 3 feet further along, but they still park like that regardless. And I'm not the type that would go and eat a face full of bush and twigs, scratching their cars trying to walk out in work clothes and with gear. Instead, I involved a third party. All the flocks of birds that used to come to the feeder in my back garden. Over a few weeks, I moved the feeders a few yards till they were out the front, right under the phone/wire cables. Adding a suet block feeder and bird bath too. Seed it and they will come, leaving lots of droppings all over my lawn, the hedge, and most of all, whichever poor bastard's car is parked under the power line. It's been a couple of weeks and already one regular parks further along the street, and I always see a few white presents sitting on the hoods of the two others that parked there. The next post is by Yoshi in Black, titled, You Want to Control My Work? I'll do it extra properly for you. I heard this story from my husband, who is a bus driver at our city, and I think it's hilarious, so I want to share it with you. I was not present at the event, so I can just paraphrase everything, and I cannot guarantee that everything happened exactly as I tell you. Also, English is not my first language, so I apologize if I make any mistakes. So, the bus department is divided in two here, and each of the departments has their own boss, HR, etc. When the department my husband works at got a new boss some time ago, the drivers, especially the older ones, doing their jobs for decades, were unhappy with him for several reasons. One thing he would do is sneak into the buses in the morning to control if people would check their buses correctly before leaving the premises, which you are obligated to by company rule. The buses we speak of can be up to 23 meters long, and the first go out at about 4 a.m. So it is still dark and you can hide inside them if you want to. One day, one of the older drivers goes to his designated bus and sees the boss sitting in the back. The driver is doing this for decades and wants to tell him a lesson. So he starts checking his bus and ignores him. He then proceeds to check everything, sees if the doors function properly, etc. And of course, he has to test the brakes as well. Normally, you just let the bus roll and brake, but he did not do so this time. He went as fast as is allowed on the premises and then stomps on the brake. If you brake like that, the bus stands after like 10 meters, so everyone and everything flies to the front. So did the boss. The boss picked himself up and went to the driver, who acted surprised, and said he didn't notice that the boss was in the bus and apologized for hurting him. After this incident, the boss never did this again, and the drivers were very happy about that. The last post is by Mac Tut, titled, I'll get my commission one way or another. This happened back in the 90s when those long distance calls were expensive. I got back home after being away for about 8 months of training for the Army National Guard. I was the only National Guard guy in my training class. Most of the other guys were regular Army and ended up in South Korea. We promised to keep in touch. I went back to work for the same sales company that I worked for before I left. I was doing telemarketing for them before I left, but there was a new manager there, and he had me ride along with the salesman I'll call M in the field. I was told I was going to get a percentage of his commissions. I could still do telemarketing in the office when I wasn't out with him if I wanted to earn some extra cash. Well, I didn't get any cut of the commissions. All I got were excuses. M would tell me to talk to the manager would tell me to talk to the office manager, and the office manager told me to talk to M. I was owed close to $300, and they weren't paying me. 3 months later, I was making money telemarketing and doing sales on my own, but it really pissed me off that I wasn't getting something I was promised. So after a few months, when I found a better job, I decided to get back in touch with my buddies in Korea. I'd still do telemarketing at the first place to make extra cash, and they were happy for the leads. I started going into the office when it was empty and calling Army Tech Control in Korea, where I knew they'd be working, and asking who was on duty. Invariably, someone I knew would be there and would shoot the breeze for a while. I ran up almost exactly a $300 phone bill with these conversations. Then I stopped showing up for the telemarketing. I got a pissed off phone call from the manager a couple weeks later. "Did you run up a $300 phone bill calling Korea?" I said yes. He said, "You have to pay for that." I said, "Take it out of my commission from when I was riding with M." I never heard from them again.